Okay, we are on and we are live for this Labor Day live stream. That's not really the reason for it, it's just when we're doing it. I'm here to take the Spekr or Spekr political quiz, however that's pronounced, I have no idea. But joining me so far is Daniel Wilcox. How you doing?
Hi there.
Have you taken this?
Nope.
No. This is like the third one of these that we've done, and so I guess that officially makes it a series, doesn't it?
I guess so. Golden number for syndication?
Well, that's 100, and we haven't made that yet. Huh. All right. Well, I guess we'll just go straight into it then. We got a few people in the chat room. Mr. Dynamite 110, Zephyr, Capitalism is Good and We Live in a Society, Isaac Clark, DJ Arms 67. I think DJ Arms is the one who recommended it. I think several people recommended this actually, but I haven't looked at it yet. I wanted to go through this fresh and see what it's like. So if you want to go along, there is a link to it down below. It's spekr.org, SPEKR.org. Isaac Clark says this seems to be the best among the political spectrum and 8 values. I haven't taken 8 values, but it doesn't have to do much to be better than political compass. So we'll take a look and see if I can scroll down. Okay, get specked on the political spectrum. I guess it's pronounced spec because of spectrum. It kind of looks like it wants to be pronounced speaker, but I don't know. So I guess we got the questions here. And we got this little diamond part here. I guess it shows me where I am. I'm starting off in the center. I can see thumb up is over here. Thumb down is over there. That's kind of backwards from how they usually do it, so that might get a bit confusing. All right. Each individual enjoys bodily autonomy and have rights. Okay, grammar problem. Have rights that no other individual or group may violate. Well, grammar notwithstanding, I'm going to agree with that. Right.
I mean, if we're arguing it as an ought, yeah.
Oh, I guess we go this arrow down here.
So yeah, gonna agree.
Right. Boom. Okay. That's what we're doing. All right. Rainbow Asteroids actually did an emoji. Sorry about that. That's not my fault. That's you.
Individuals have the freedom to decide what they knowingly and voluntarily consume. Can I agree with that?
Yeah, all right. I must say I don't like this UI. There's a lot of moving from the question to the arrow. All right. Slavery is acceptable in certain circumstances, such as punishment for crime. So I guess they're talking about prison labor. I really don't like prison labor, so I'm going to
not going to agree with that.
It's weird having the thumb. They need to switch this around. People are used to the thumb up being. All right. Freedom of expression should be unhindered by government, regardless of the content. Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, look, it gives me a little progress bar down there. Okay.
Yeah, I see that now.
Hate speech should be banned. Disagree. This is good so far. Control of communications by government is necessary so as to prevent the spread of ideas that may undermine the nation. Nope. Golden Dash says I always end up way down into the right corner. Well, I'm going down. I'm not sure which left and right I'm going, but
you lost me about as far. You lost me as far as you lost me at control of speech, buddy.
Yeah. Control of communications. Yeah. All right. Provision of the internet should be socialized and made available free of charge. As PG O'Rourke said about healthcare, if you think it's expensive now, wait until it's free. So, my microphone was really up last time and it was catching like every time I drank water and stuff like that. So I've got it further away from me and hopefully it's not catching. I can at least mute the coughs, I think.
I'm getting down there and slightly to the right, I think.
I've got like a tiny little bit going to the right. People should be free to engage or abstain from religious activities that do not violate the rights of others, of course. Blasphemy law should be reinstated. Nope. Government should neither aid nor attack any religion. All right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Religious organizations should not be exempt from taxation. Well, I think everyone should be exempt from taxation. So I guess do I agree or disagree? It should not be.
I think we should just kind of go neutral on this one because it's an awkwardly worded question, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I'm getting the negatives mixed up in my head. This should be worded better. If I believe that religious should be exempt from taxation, then I would be agreeing, but it says not, so I should disagree. But then that implies that I want them to be taxed. Or does it?
Shane.
Hey, Daniel, I'm trying to figure out the wording of this question.
That's Chris.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, Chris.
Yeah, sorry.
I get names wrong all the time. I'm sorry.
I'm a few minutes late. Sorry about that.
That's all right. We are up to, I don't know what question this is because it's not numbered. I'm trying to figure out religious organizations should not be exempt from taxation. I'm going to disagree with that.
Yeah.
I might do what I did with Political Compass and just disagree with badly worded questions just because.
I mean, fortunately here they have a neutral option, so...
Yeah, at least there's that. You don't have to...
I'm going to go with
churches should not be tax exempt. You know, I mean, as much as I would love to cause the Church of Scientology to go bankrupt, I don't want anyone to be paying taxes.
Yeah, I think everyone should be tax exempt. That's the thing.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna get neutral on this one myself.
Little off topic, but you know, it's pretty funny how people think the U.S. government is the only thing that can stop, you know, big religions like that, like Scientology. It's like, no, there's plenty of ways you can fight them.
Yep. All right. You have nothing to fear if you have nothing to hide is a valid statement. Yeah.
Disagree.
These are fairly easy so far.
Yeah, disagree. It's none of your damn business, officer.
Government transparency is vital to accountability. I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
When you do a FOIA request and you get these black pages back.
Yeah, Shane, I'm just gonna say I never understood the whole point of if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. No, it's supposed to work the other way around. If you pull me over, officer, the burden of proof is on you. That's why I've actually heard this. If you're ever pulled over, even if you know why you've been pulled over, you should always say, "Oh no, officer, I have no idea why you pulled me over." When he asks you that, because that's self-incrimination, and you have the right to not do that.
Mm-hmm.
The burden of proof is on him. He has to show you that speedometer thing saying, yeah, you know, you were going 60 in a 40-mile-per-hour zone, or he has to explain why. You know, he can't. You know, if you say, "Oh, I guess I was speeding," he's like, "Oh, you confessed. I'm gonna write you up a ticket now."
But a lot of times, if you contest it and you go, "Officer, I'd really like to see the speed thing," because they have to show you that, they might just say, "You know what? I'm just gonna let you off with a warning." Well, it's like, yeah, okay, I see what you were doing there.
Oh yeah, I've heard they'll usually, surprisingly, often let you go or give you a very, very lighter, you know, ticket if you can test it, because they know that if you actually challenge it, it's not going to hold up in a court, you know. That's another thing you said. If you want to contest a ticket, always say, "I don't want to go up to a hearing. I want a trial by jury." And 90% of the time, they'll either drop all the charges or they'll say, "Okay, we'll just fine you $15 and we won't put it on your points. Okay, sorry about that."
Right, because if it's more than $20, they have to give you a jury trial under the Constitution. Rainbow Asteroids asked, didn't Political Compass have a neutral option? I think they didn't, and that was the problem, right?
Yeah, that was kind of the issue. There's no neutral option for Political Compass. There's agree, disagree, strong, and strongly on either.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know why. It's because the whole point of the Political Compass is to basically create a we and not we.
What if there's a voluntary tax? Well, there's no such thing. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's a voluntary, it's not really a tax, is it?
Yeah, it's a charge. It's a fee. It's a price. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and the thing about the voluntary tax, like if there's a government that doesn't tax, but you know you have to pay to use its service, or you willingly give money, that's just called paying for a good or donating.
Government surveillance should be expanded to combat terrorism. Disagree.
Yeah, disagree.
People should. What's it?
Government expansion is why we have terrorism.
Yep. People should be secure in their homes, property, and communications. Agree.
Yeah.
I will say, Shane, the biggest pet peeve of mine is when we bring that up and people are like, "Oh, so you're saying we deserved 9/11?" No. What we're saying is that it was a reckless policy that caused the hatred for the U.S. that led to 9/11.
Right. In order to solve crimes, the police need the power to conduct surgery. Okay, without a warrant,
Yeah.
Sexual orientation, preference, gender, and gender identity should have no impact on the government's treatment of individuals. Agree?
Yeah. Actually, Shane, the thing about the police again, I was watching the video you've heard of Steven Anderson, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with that myself.
I have not. I think this vertical axis is social, and I'm going more free on social, which I guess is down.
Okay. Well, anyway, Shane, just a little quick thing about Steven Anderson. He's that really racist and homophobic Baptist preacher and all that. He's part of like an independent Baptist church or whatever. He's gotten some pretty infamy. Well, there was a video of him where he got pulled over by Border Patrol and he wasn't being cooperative, and they really had no reason to pull him over, and he ended up getting tased and beaten. And the real sad thing is that a lot of atheists are like, "Yeah, beat him up," and I kept telling people, I don't like Steven Anderson either, but when you cheer and applaud the police, for beating this guy up, what's going to stop them from beating you up?
Yeah.
And they didn't get it. They're like, "No, but he was a homophobic bigot, so he deserves it."
Isaac Clark says, "I see no reason why you need more than 3 shots loaded," and he says 4 burglars, even if it's just 1. Sometimes it takes 4 because it's not like in the movies where anyone gets slightly shot anywhere and they die. Something like 85% of target points on the body are non-lethal, and what you want to do is you want to keep firing as long as the threat is there, and then stop firing the instant the threat is gone. And there have been cases where it's taken 4 or 5 shots to take a guy down.
Yeah, not to mention, as the old saying goes, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, because you never know. As a whole, from what I've read, for the most part, most guys, they'll go down or run away after 1 or 2 shots, but still, you don't know that. You might get a guy, who's armored, or he's pumped up on barbiturates and thinks he's invincible, because I've heard some drugs do that to people. They literally believe they're bulletproof, and there's accounts of them attacking police officers, and the police literally there was one story I read about, and this was a case where an officer legitimately had to use lethal force to protect himself, and this guy was so high on barbiturates, and the officer actually shot him twice in the chest and stomach, and he was still going.
Yeah, we've got accounts from soldiers online. You can read them when, they have their AR-15, this most destructive weapon, and they're shooting this guy 20 times, and he's still running. So government should have the authority to define, license, or restrict personal relationships. Yeah, disagree.
Yeah. You know what driver's licenses are, Shane? They're just the way the government can have a national ID system without having a national ID system.
Well, and then this is the thing I keep saying when they talk about, we need to license hairdressers and all this other stuff. It's like, look at how many idiots there are in the road, dangerous idiots, and consider that almost all of them are licensed by the government. That should give you an idea of how good licensing is.
And here's another thing: a license is, like you said, a license isn't gonna make bad drivers go away. And it's gonna be like, "Oh, don't worry, this guy's not gonna drive drunk and recklessly because he was already caught and he got his license suspended." Well, what does he do? He goes to a friend's house, gets a few beers, and he's about to leave, and his friend's like, "I don't think you should be driving home." It's like, "Oh, I got this. I won't get pulled over."
Consenting adults should be free to choose their own sexual practices. I agree with that. All right.
Yeah, if you, if you want to pee in each other's mouths, that's gross, but it's none of my damn business. Okay.
Let's try to keep from getting this one demonetized. The last one was demonetized. Let's try to keep this one clean.
I was going to say, how did you know what I did last night?
That's that surveillance state again. Access to abortion should be regulated by the government.
Yep.
No.
Criminal laws should be limited to violation of the rights of others through force or fraud.
Yep.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I'd
rather say the initiation of force or fraud, but close enough.
Yeah.
No victim, no crime is a valid statement. Yep.
And Shane, here's another thing I love saying from some people who hate ANCAPs. They're like, oh, but without a state, how are you gonna enforce your private property rights?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what I'd love to say if an ANCOM tells them that, I'm like, if they say that and they're like an ANCOM or an ANSOL, I'll just ask them, I don't know. I don't know. Without a state, what's gonna force people to be collective and distribute all their wealth?
Hello, Fourth Root.
Hey, Fourth.
Hey, how's it going?
You're sounding a bit like a Dalek there, Fourth.
I'm sounding bad?
Yeah, you're...
Hey, some random guy who I've never met and don't know.
This is Alex Fobble.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, really. A bunch of interference coming from you there, Fourth.
How about you? Is this better?
Yeah, you sound like you're deliberately shushing into your mic because you're trying to hang up a call on someone you don't like, and you're saying, "Oh, I'm going through a tunnel." Shh. Oh, sorry. Shh. Gotta go.
I think it was a bad microphone on my headset.
Okay, well, you're sounding better now, so...
Speaking of which, how am I sounding? Am I still really quiet, or...?
Oh, you're fine. You're sounding fine to me.
Last time I was on, I was so quiet I could barely hear myself.
Well, you're up to the yellow on my VU meter, which is about where we all are. So I'm hoping that will yeah, that's an indication of what people on the live stream are hearing. Because like last time I was really loud and overpowering, I backed off my mic for that. All right, banned medicinal and recreational drugs should remain illegal. Disagree.
Yeah. We should keep it illegal because it totally worked with alcohol.
Yeah. I'm still having to think about this. They need to flip this around. Agree should be over here on the right, not the left. That's where people used to be. All right, please.
Recently, regarding the drug issue, I presented a very persuasive argument to a conservative that I work with who wanted marijuana to be illegal. And I basically just made the externality tax argument to him, like, well, okay, let's assume that doing drugs imparts a cost on the rest of society. Well, then the remedy for that wouldn't be to just outright make it illegal. You would tax the drugs and apply those taxes to rehabilitation programs. In which case, so you don't create this big black market, and you don't lump non-violent criminals into the same category as violent criminals. And you found that actually really persuasive. Now, I don't think that would be the best option. I think it should be just completely legal. But I think that opens the door, at least, to a lot of people who are hard lines. No drugs should be legal. If you present it, well, maybe they don't have to be totally illegal. But here would be an objectively better option than just making them completely illegal.
Yeah, I don't get why we think that the best solution to a guy who's addicted to pot is to throw him in a maximum security prison. It's like,
yeah.
I saw this thing one time where there's a bunch of guys sitting around and they're doing the whole bragging thing about that, and they're like, "So what are you in here for?" "I robbed a car, or killed a bunch of cops, and took a kid hostage." "What are you in here for?" "I violently raped a bunch of young women, then ripped their throats out and ate them." "What are you in here for?" I was caught smoking a little bit of marijuana."
And there goes our monetization.
It's kind of like Alice's restaurant. It said, "What are you in here for?" I said, "Littering." And they all started backing away from me and giving me the hairy eyeball until I said, "and create a nuisance." And then we were all friends again. All right, police, fire, and ambulance services should be provided by the market. Yes.
Agree.
So there already are in some areas, and from what I've read, they actually do a hell of a lot better job than normal stuff.
Oh yeah.
The only problem with why they're so inefficient is because I've heard socialists say, "Yeah, what about this one county that has a private ambulance corps, but they didn't arrive when they really need them, and someone died." And you look it up, and then you find out, oh yeah, the reason why was because they still use the government for 911, and the 911 operator wasn't doing their goddamn job.
Yeah, well, and it's all these private fire departments, look at these cases where they're just sitting by and letting the house burn down, and you look at it and they're actually government fire.
And then they go on, and even then they go on like, "Oh, but what roads are they using?"
Yeah. Oh, Shane,
but it's like they made this big deal about this one. I think it was in Tennessee or Kentucky or something like that. This is a problem with private, and if you know about private, it's always going to be like that. And then everyone started pointing out, no, actually read the story. This was the city fire department. And everyone shut up about it. There's no outrage at all about it when the state does it.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, you know, it was because he technically wasn't in the city; he was on the county line, and he offered to pay for them. You know, he said, "Look, you got to save my property. I've got dogs, I've got valuables in there. Look, I'll pay you. Look, I'll pay you to put it out." And they're like, "Nope, we're not allowed to do it." Yet they still put out his neighbors.
That's the thing. They weren't allowed. It was the city ordinance restricting them.
I'm trying to get in here for minutes here. Here's the thing about that case. Way back in the day when that happened, the user Goat made an excellent video about that, and that is that this was in a rural county, right? And they didn't have mandatory fire protection. That you opted into having fire protection for that area, and it was a relatively low annual fee, but the guy chose not to take it. And the thing is, though, you know, if that is your policy, really the only sustainable business model that you can have is to not provide the fire protection service when it's needed if they don't pay, because otherwise nobody's going to pay, because they can just pay for the service when there's an actual fire, and then there's no there's no way to fund the fire departments that are needed to actually provide those services. So it actually makes sense that they should deny the service.
But then there's the issue of that they're pretty much an enforced monopoly. So
yeah, and he offered to pay them. He said, "Look, I'll pay you guys. I swear, I've got the money in the bank." And they're still like, "Nope, we can't do it. It's against city ordinance."
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because that still would have been because if everybody could just pay for whatever it costs to come and put out the fire when there's a fire, it still doesn't cover all the costs that the fire department has.
Well, then by that logic, most plumbing and gardening services would be out of business, because they don't, get, a lot of them, at least to my knowledge, don't get a subscription fee. They're literally paid by when you call them. They don't get paid until you call them and say, "Hey, I want yard work done," or "I need my plumbing fixed."
Well, and when they do have a subscription fee, a lot of people will opt for that because they like this idea of a consistent monthly fee instead of having to pay whenever they come in. So.
Yeah, for fires, it's a little bit different, though, because the fire department always has to be on standby, and they rarely get called. Some of these rural fire departments can go months or years without ever having a call. And
that's not true. They get a lot of calls. It's just that contrary to popular belief, they're not always fire calls, because they also run the ambulance services. So the majority of their calls are medical, not fire.
Right.
But and also fire calls are. Fire calls are all sorts of things. They're dispatched to traffic accidents in the case one of the cars catches on fire. Anytime someone sees something they think is smoke, they have to call out and check it out. So they actually get called quite a lot.
They're also called out. They're also called out.
The point was that it was an opt-in fire service. Now, I don't know, or I don't believe there were any laws that were preventing other volunteer fire departments from popping up in the area. It's just this happened to be the only one in the area, but it was an opt-in system. So really what the fire department had the policy was to allow people to opt out of it, and this guy chose to opt out. He understood the risk, but then he tried to change his mind when there was an actual fire, and oh no, but I'll pay for you to come out here. Well, sorry, that's not sustainable.
Well, I mean, if they pay for the expenses of it, it'd be a couple thousand or whatever it would be. But I would think
$20,000 or something that they would actually have to charge, and they're never going to get that out of them.
I would think that insurance companies would, because they're the ones who have to pay for fire damage, and so I would think that an insurance company would give you a nice discount, especially if it were a case where you had the possibility of competing fire districts. That would incentivize someone to set up because they have different ratings for different fire districts. The only thing is I can't choose my own. There's another one nearby with a better rating that I'd love to have because that would be less money off my fire insurance.
And that's another thing too. You know, I mean, as Daniel pointed out earlier, that particular fire department, it was the county, and therefore it was basically a state-backed monopoly. And you know, you talk about how, well, it's an opt-in system. Well, what if all your friends and all that tell you, I hate this fire department, they're garbage, they always arrive way too late, and they, you know, and they're way too expensive, because every time we say, we say, oh, you know, my cat's caught in a tree, they send the entire division out there, they're expensive, they're wasteful, I don't trust them. Well, he doesn't really have an option.
Here's the question. Suppose the county didn't have a fire department, but there's only enough economic room for there to be one volunteer fire department. Well, in that case, it would have been no different. You would have had a volunteer fire department that says, hey, you got to pay your annual fee or we're not going to come out to your house. Now, do you still want the government to force that volunteer fire department to come out and put out a fire of somebody's house? If, you know, that.
I don't want government to force anyone to do anything.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, Fourth Root. Even if it was a private company, of non-government ways, you know, to get money from a paying client, you know, I mean, it happens all the time with credit card companies.
In effect, it was a private fire department. In effect, because it was an opt-in system. You either, you know, paid to have fire protection, or you didn't, and there were no laws preventing a volunteer fire department from being created in that county.
Okay, so why was there only one economic room, as you put it, for one?
Because it wasn't a very big county. There wasn't a lot of, you know, property to protect or whatever. I mean, sometimes there, you know, in small towns or rural areas, sometimes there is only one general store, or only one fire department or whatever. Sometimes that's the reality.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town, and that's always seemed fishy to me. We've always had, you know, several general stores and restaurants and stuff like that. We were a small town of like less than 1,000, I think.
Yeah,
I've lived in a small town all my life, so.
Yeah.
Well.
All right, let's move on. Individuals who voluntarily assume risk of physical harm to themselves are a burden on society, and such behavior should be banned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, what does that even mean? I mean, if you like to go bungee jumping, you know, that's a risk of physical harm. Driving down the road is a risk of physical harm. You can make that about anything.
Yeah.
No, although you're absolutely right. People are a risk to themselves because people are stupid, but that doesn't mean that you just let the stupid people weed themselves out.
Yeah.
Actually, that's actually why one thing that John Stossel, I saw in a video that he said you can't even talk about it. It's very controversial and it pisses a lot of people off, but it actually makes sense. If you're gonna go do a very dangerous risk and all that, you know, if everything goes snafu and you have to call emergency services, you should be required to pay for it. You know.
Yeah. Restitution.
Sorry.
Restitution should be paid to victims at the expense of the criminal or negligent wrongdoer. I'll go along with that.
That doesn't seem too disagreeable there.
It's not too disagreeable, provided that it's done fairly in a court of law, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think we're making that assumption at least.
Who would disagree with that? For example, you know, this was a ballot there was a ballot initiative in Colorado a couple years back about pushing the
You're popping out there, Fourth.
The anti-slavery clause or whatever. How there is an exception for when it is prescribed as the punishment for a crime. And
slavery. I love slavery.
Hey, Jake.
Anyway, the Libertarian Party of Colorado's argument was that you know, they supported the change to the Constitution because that can prevent the government from exploiting using labor as
yeah, but going back to this question was about restitution being paid to victims, not the government being able to put them to work.
Yeah, there should definitely be restitution to victims. That just seems like a no-brainer.
Weird noises coming from Artemis, but what else is new? Rights such as due process and the presumption of innocence are relics of the past and only interfere with obtaining criminal convictions. That's basically every episode of Law and Order.
Yeah, Law and Order. It's so fun. Yeah, it's so funny watching cop shows like that. It's like, yeah, it's like they break into the guy's place. They don't have a warrant or anything, and you know.
And we're supposed to sympathize with them.
Oh,
yeah.
Actually,
and the Constitution is just this thing that gets in the way of justice.
Yeah, actually, Shane, I was watching a video on YouTube about To Catch a Predator and Perverted Justice, and the thing is, you know, I understand why people are doing this. You know, I don't want, you know, perverts going on there, you know, picking up, you know, small children. But the problem is, and the judge actually said this, he's actually against groups like that because when they asked him, well, why is that? It's like what they don't say about To Catch a Predator is that the majority of those pedophiles they got, the judge had to let them go. And when they asked him, why did you let all these predators go? It's like, because there wasn't due process being followed. They weren't getting a proper investigation. They were forging warrants and all that. So I literally had no choice but to let them go because it's just, it's a mistrial.
Yeah. This one is jury nullification. Juries should be able to judge not just the facts, but also the justice of the law.
Of course.
Yeah, no, the thing about the presumption of innocence is actually it's a heuristic. It's kind of a Hanlon's razor, never attribute to malice that which can adequately be attributed to stupidity. You know, I'm like I'm a Bayesian, right? So you know, it all depends on the prior probability, and so the prior probability that there's something that I don't quite understand, or that there you know, something stupid happened rather than something malicious actually is generally higher. So it's a overall good idea to presume innocence. But
well, and if you look at the crime statistics, they have to be per 100,000 because most people don't commit crimes, so the prior probability is they're not a criminal.
Right, yeah. Exactly, and that's what people tend to underestimate is how they tend to overestimate the likelihood of somebody being a criminal.
Yeah, also, I'm not sure this is just me, but we don't seem to be moving too far on the x-axis.
I know we're not moving as far along as we need to because we're more than half an hour in. We're not even halfway through the questions, so we need to, especially for stuff we've talked about a lot. We kind of need to, you know, summarize those and move on.
Because we're shooting right down the y-axis, but
yeah,
that's what you have me for.
Dispute resolution cannot be effectively provided by the market, and this requires the government justice system. Disagree. Prisons as they currently exist should be abolished. That's an interesting little...
Not the way I use them.
I think if you were to set up an institution dedicated to psychological torture, you couldn't do a better job than the U.S. prison system. Yeah. So I'm going to agree with that.
They say abolish. Isn't there? I think we would all agree that the current system should at the very least change, and it should be run very differently than it currently is. But that doesn't mean abolishing prisons. It just means having prisons operate under a different rule set.
Well, it says as they currently exist. That's what the question says.
Yeah, but doesn't that mean that...
Are they referring to the U.S. prison system? Because
it doesn't say. That's the problem.
Guys, can we go fourth and then Chris?
Thank you. Yeah, so that's the weird thing, because any change technically abolishes prisons as they currently exist. And I think everybody agrees with a little bit of change.
Well, even Trump passed some prison reform.
Badly worded question. They should word it like the prison system should be changed a lot. Agree or disagree? That would be a better wording.
Yeah. It's not a well worded question, but we'll go with it. The only legitimate use of force is in defense of individual rights, life, liberty, and justly required property against aggression. Yeah, that's the map.
Disagree.
Repeat that list again.
The only legitimate use of force is in defense of individual rights, life, liberty, and justly acquired property against aggression.
Okay. Disagree.
So, how would that apply to, say, CO2 emissions.
Or killing heretics.
Right? If you're polluting the atmosphere of the world, but no particular property owner any more than any other.
Well, you actually are aggressing against other people's property in that case, aren't you?
Plus, CO2 is not a pollutant, but I'll save that for another day.
Individual property, right?
Well, CO2 is kind of necessary for plants. So the problem is the overall levels of CO2, and you can't really blame any one person for that because we're all contributing to it.
Right. But my issue there was it said individual property rights. It didn't talk about collective property, which I would say
well, because there's no such thing.
Collective property.
Yeah, property is about exclusivity, and how do you exclude a collective?
I will say Rothbard did. Hold on, Forth. I will say Rothbard did make a case for collective property with the analogy of the cleared path of the cleared path.
Right.
Like there's a path to a gazebo that a bunch of people on their own. Hold on. Just there's a path to a gazebo that a bunch of people just clear over time.
Yeah, that's a right of way.
Yeah. Now, in regards to what Shane said, you said property is exclusivity. So I think under that definition, the atmosphere in general wouldn't be counted as individual property. And so under those rules that was mentioned in that question, I would say, well, I think there is room for the government to say levy a carbon tax. So I would tend to slightly disagree with that statement.
Except it's pretty much the agreement of all economists that Pigovian taxes don't work. So, all people have the right to self-defense.
I think there is a legitimate use of force for the government to deter, say, doing something that affects the atmosphere as a whole in a negative way. And an example of that is carbon dioxide.
Okay, Forth, we need to move on. Okay.
We can't spend a whole lot of time discussing each and every question here. All people have the right to self-defense, and they may agree to be aided by other individual or group. Yep.
Agree.
Yep. Agree.
Individuals do not have the right to keep and bear arms. Disagree. People should be prosecuted for exercising the right to self-defense. No way.
Disagree.
Hell no.
Private property owners should be free to set the rules regarding the presence of weapons on their own property. Agree.
Yeah.
Government should restrict, register, and monitor the ownership, manufacture, and transfer of firearms and ammunition.
Disagree.
Nope. Yeah.
I mean, that should have been lost as soon as it said government should be able to restrict.
Actually, as soon as it said government should. I mean, that's...
Yeah.
As soon as
How
you
am I
say
supposed to burn
government, that's
witches
it.
without my private flamethrower?
You lost me at the word government. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Real quickly, I can easily make a fertilizer bomb out of materials you can buy at Walmart, so it's pointless to begin with.
Yeah, and Artemis, if you could turn your mic down, I think we'd all appreciate that. Respect for private property rights is fundamental to maintaining a free and prosperous society. Yep. Contracts to obtain, retain, profit from, manage, or dispose of one's private property should be regulated by the government.
Disagree.
Yeah, I'm going to say disagree. Your right to contract should be unlimited. Private property owners have the right to control and enjoy their property so long as their choices do not harm or infringe on the rights of others. Yeah, I'm going to check the chat right quick just to see.
Did you have something you wanted to say, Forth?
Oh, I just said that enforce contracts. Government should enforce contracts. Regulating contracts.
Well, there needs to be some system of it. It doesn't have to be government, but there needs to be some dispute resolution thing going on.
Yeah, I'm fine with that being the government.
The practices of eminent domain and civil asset forfeiture should be abolished. Agree. Now we're going to the right. Now we're going to the right here.
Yeah, I can see it.
Spectral joke, government should be abolished. There you go. One question. That's all you need.
Which is funny, Shane, because eminent domain is one of the very few things that that both the left and the right publicly tend to agree on. The only difference is they disagree with it. The left wants to take it away, wants to take your private property away to build green energy projects and these community projects, whereas the right wants to take it to try to redevelop it and because they think that if we build a bunch of big buildings and all that, that'll magically boost our local economy.
In order to protect the poor from the rich, limits on profits, production mandates, and controls on prices of goods and services are necessary. Disagree.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree. This is a poorly worded question.
I disagree. That's how you make people poor.
Yeah.
You were going to say something? You were going to say something, Fourth?
Always leads to problems. It's one of the debates that I get in often where it's just probably the most frustrating to get the other side to realize what, they just have this emotional reaction to them is when it comes to quote unquote price gouging.
Yeah.
How I think that there shouldn't be any price limits, even during a hurricane on generators or something. And
maybe even especially during a hurricane, because that's when you really need the price signals to say, hey, we need more resources coming into this area of the country.
Well,
I've seen cases where they put a price cap on, say, water bottles, and just a small handful of people just bought out the whole supply.
Yep.
Yeah.
And no one's bringing in new water. Yeah.
I think the perfect example of why price gouging is bad is look at the 1973 energy crisis. Contrary to popular belief, the energy crisis was not caused by the OPEC embargo of the United States. It was caused because when OPEC declared that, the U.S. is an ally of Israel, then we're not going to sell oil to them, the U.S. government panicked, and they're like, oh no, we got to start rationing gasoline, we got to cancel this. And what happened?
Nixon set wage and price controls, and that's
Yep, and all the big transportation corporations, bought all the gasoline to keep their businesses afloat, and nobody else had any because it was all gone.
In order to protect the poor from the rich, limits on profits. Oh, I just did that one. Sorry.
Yeah, you just
for voluntary dealings.
Gonna agree with that.
For voluntary dealings, parties should be free to trade with who they want and on mutually agreeable terms. Yep.
Daniel, just a little thing. I'm not watching the live stream because it lags and it's just awkward. So I'm just gonna listen. So could you wait till Shane's done reading before you yell agree or disagree? Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, since not everyone's watching, let him know the question. Yeah, I've been kind of trailing off at the end anyway, so I'll read them out in toto from here on. Private landowners do not have an incentive to maintain natural resources and as such need to be regulated by the government. Disagree. It's the exact opposite.
Disagree.
What?
It's the exact opposite.
Because the government.
How do things work?
Because the government totally cares about about land resources. That's why all the public land on California is on fire.
Yep. To prevent government pollution and misuse of natural resources, public land should be privatized. I'll agree with that.
Agree.
Yeah.
Protecting the environment requires that resources like land, water, air, and wildlife should be held in common and private ownership restricted. Disagree.
That's what Tragedy of the Commons is called.
Yep. The profit motive stifles the innovations and behavioral changes required to protect the environment, requiring intervention in the market. Disagree.
Hell no.
We've talked about that a lot.
You know how many products are out there? Hey, people, whoever asked that question, you know how many products are out there where their main selling point is it's environmentally friendly?
Tesla.
We're still not even halfway in. How many questions are on this thing? Environmental advocates and social pressure are a more effective means of changing public behavior than government action. Yep.
Agreed.
Because government action just sends them to a black market or whatever.
Yeah.
Subsidies for energy production should be abolished. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Energy pricing, allocation, and production are too important to be left to the market and should be controlled by government. No.
Pascal's wager.
No, it's too important to leave it to the government.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, it's a Pascal's wager.
Here's a question. Food is arguably the most essential thing, so why do you not apply that argument there?
People who think they are entitled...
I mean, they did one time in other countries, didn't end well.
People who think they are entitled to keep what they earn are merely being selfish and should be forced to pay their fair share. Didn't they already do that when they earn the money? That's how they earn the money.
Well, people think money is people have this weird view that money is intrinsically valuable. Like, oh, he has all the money. All we have is all this stuff we gave all the money for.
Yeah, people also seems to think that there's a finite amount of money. It reminds me of this thing I saw in a cartoon one time where this little girl who's a super genius believes that the best way to solve all the world's problems is she believes money is the root of all evil. So she's going to use her genius to collect all the world's money. And then when she has it all, she's going to destroy it and people will be free again. And I'm just thinking that's impossible because...
And that's communism.
People will just create another form of money and use that.
Yeah.
Well, the whole thing is a non sequitur anyways. Like, okay, people wanting to keep their own money is selfish. Yes, which is why they should be allowed to keep it because they're selfish. And if you don't give them that incentive to do that, they won't try to earn the money in the first place.
Not to mention it's hypocritical, and it's like, do you not hear yourself talking? It's like you're greedy because you're hoarding all the money. You should give some of that to me because I'm less fortunate. Dude, that's right there. You're being greedy.
I think I'm getting confused again on which way is agree and which way is disagree.
The right is disagree.
Disagree. Okay. All right. I'm good. Apparently, there are 70 questions according to Isaac Clarke. So let's see. Taxation is the price we pay for civilization. Is valid?
Nope.
No.
No.
Government budgets should be balanced by curbing expenditure and not raising taxes. Yep.
Yeah, that seems decent.
How about stop spending money?
Yep. Taxes won't
well,
raise revenue.
that's what it said. Yeah.
Oh, that's what it means. Yeah.
People should be free to choose which products and services they wish to purchase and not be forced to pay for something against their will.
Yep.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
a no-brainer.
Free market banking with competition among banks and depository institutions of all types is preferable to a system controlled by a central bank. Yep.
Sounds good.
I was reading something that the people are talking about, like all these banking panics and crises of the 19th century. And when you look at it, these crises happen like less than 1% of GDP, was lost in the banking crisis. And if you use that criteria, we have a banking crisis every 8 months.
Yeah.
So.
And here's another thing that a lot of people don't tell you. It wasn't the poor who were lobbying for the Federal Reserve and all that. It was the big mega banking corporations like Wells Fargo and
of course, if they told you that, the whole thing would fall apart. The whole argument.
Yeah.
Profits and losses should be
really
socialized.
Makes you think.
No.
Profits and losses should be socialized. No.
Actually, it's funny. About losses being socialized because Peter Schiff brought that up. Is everyone's always talking about you got to share the wealth, and he's like, okay, well, what about sharing the losses? Well, no, because the business been out of business because of your mistake, not mine. It's like, so you want us to share the wealth, but not the risks.
Yep. Individuals who engage in voluntary exchange should be free to use as money any mutually agreeable commodity or item. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Inflationary monetary policies and legal tender law should be abolished. Yep.
Mm-hmm. You had me at abolished.
Well, this one you don't have me with. Money should be abolished, so no. You can't. Like I said, people are going to...
depends on the kind of money
right.
we're talking about.
Well, it just says money in general, and like I said, people are just going to create their own money if you abolish the current money.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
And I'm gonna go new because while I don't necessarily think it would be practical, it's just I really just don't have a strong opinion on like a principled stance.
All right, Daniel's a socialist. Let's move on. All right. Just kidding.
Burn him.
Is this the communist idea of abolishing money, or is this the anarcho-capitalist idea of abolishing money?
Well, anarcho-capitalists don't abolish money. They abolish, legal tender laws and things like that, but they don't abolish money.
Yeah, maybe, but government-issued currency they would abolish, but but the communists want to abolish, the profit incentive in general.
Yeah, they want to get rid of all money.
Can I just say something real quickly before we move on? It's like, even if, like, let's say hypothetically speaking, you got rid of money, people are still going to be bartering, and, if I want to trade a cow for something, the cow itself would be considered a form of currency, so...
Yep.
Actually,
it's whatever you trade with.
Actually, the Sanskrit word for war literally means desire for more cows.
Yeah.
The whole money
individuals
thing is what I hate most about Star Trek. I love Star Trek, except for like that thing, like the Ferengi are all backwards because they're capitalists, and they don't really have money, and society is great. It's like, what?
You should watch Deep
But
Space
they
Nine.
did a few good episodes. They did a few good episodes where the Ferengi were making good arguments for the market.
But they don't explain how that society works without money. They just say, oh, it's socialist utopia.
Well, I think the writers just got confused because in Star Trek 4, they said it's a problem because they didn't use money, but they meant that they weren't using, cash like green pieces of paper from the 20th century, and they had to go and get some. And somehow with the Next Gen people, that got interpreted, because if you watch the first episode of Next Gen, it's like Dr. Crusher, I think, is down at Farpoint, and she wants to buy something, and she says something like, "Can you charge it to my account on the Enterprise?" So, I mean, they started off having money, and then the writers just decided they didn't. So,
yeah. Well, I'm thinking of First
Really
Contact,
makes you think.
and one of the early episodes, like the first episode where they introduced the Ferengi in Next Gen. Those two,
Yeah.
it frustrated me.
well, the Ferengi weren't. They were cringe at first, but they weren't supposed to be like the Marketeers. They ended up being like on DS9. So,
Yeah,
I'm gonna-
it really
Alright.
seemed pretty anti-Semitic for depiction too.
individuals have the right to form corporations, cooperatives, and other types of entities based on voluntary association. Well, technically, corporation is a government grant, but I think we get the spirit of the question there. And
Yeah,
I'll
I
agree.
get
Hard pass. Disagree.
I'm gonna agree with
I'm
Steve.
gonna disagree.
That's a thing. That's a thing that a lot of people ignore. Like, they think that corporations pop up out of magic. Like, whenever someone gets enough money, it's like, no, they're created by the government. If your company makes enough money and has enough businesses, you go to the government and you register, saying, "Hey, can we be a limited liability corporation?" And if the government likes you, they'll say, "Oh, yep, you are." And that's the reason why corporations are so difficult to fight. It's not because they have money and resources. It's because they have, on law, limited liability, because that's what the government says.
Artemis, if your volume could go down, and Darth, if yours could go up a bit, I think we'd be better. Okay. Private ownership of the means of production should be abolished. Disagree.
Yeah, I'm gonna...
You cut out there, Daniel. All right. Subsidies.
Yeah, I don't think abolishing private ownership in the means of production necessarily means that anything's going to replace it. I think it just makes people poor.
Right.
Well, not unless you're one of those people that thinks the Earth is overpopulated and hundreds of millions of people need to starve to death before we can create the utopian society.
Yeah. I love the Freedom Tunes episode of the world according to my sociology professor or something.
Subsidies and bailouts to businesses, labor, and other special interests should be abolished. Yeah, subsidies and bailouts should be abolished. Yeah.
Subsidies and bailouts are the same thing. They're just politically. The word subsidy was basically just invented as a way to make it sound like it was more public friendly. Yeah.
This one's weird.
Bailout and bankruptcy.
This one's weird. Public entities should be able to compete with private enterprise. Flip it around, and I would say, yeah, let private enterprise, compete with police and stuff like that. I'm not really sure what this question is going for.
This is a trick question.
Another problem is, like, are they talking about public as in government owned, or are they talking about public like a publicly traded company?
Yeah, I'm going to leave that as neutral because I don't know what it's asking.
Hey, just letting you know, dog.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're cutting out again.
My connection dropped, so I'm going phone. So quiz.
Yeah, you're coming in and out. We can't understand you.
My connection dropped.
Okay, we got that.
So I'm
all right.
on my phone.
We
But I
understand
Alright.
you're not
With-
understood.
We understand, Daniel. Let's try to move on, okay?
Employment and compensation agreements between employers and employees are private and should not be encumbered by social engineering. Agree.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yep.
Private
I was about to say, but Shane, in Europe, they have all these mandated severance pay and paid maternity leave. Yeah, and they also have double-digit unemployment.
All right, we're coming up on an hour, so private employers and employees should be required by law to bargain with each other through labor unions. Nope.
Nope.
Membership in a labor union should be a requirement for obtaining employment. Nope.
Well, I mean, if it's beneficial, why would you require 'em?
Yeah, you don't need it to be a requirement if it's actually, yeah. It can be voluntary, but it would only work voluntarily if the workers felt they were getting something. Compulsory arbitration and obligations to bargain are necessary to ensure that bosses do not exploit their workers. Disagree. Provision of education should be socialized and made available free of charge.
No.
Disagree.
No.
Education is best provided by the free market, achieving greater quality, accountability, and efficiency with more diversity of choice. Agree.
Yep.
I mean, look at the internet.
The education of children is the financial responsibility of parents or guardians, not the government. Agree.
Yeah.
Health insurance companies exploit the sick and dying to make a profit and therefore should be regulated by the government. You probably got that.
Yeah.
Emotionally loaded argument.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And by that logic, grocery stores are are profiting off of people who are hungry and need clothes.
Yeah,
Individuals-
It all hinges on this nebulous word that sounds really bad. Exploit.
Yep.
I too buy my
Individuals-
clothes from a grocery store.
Individuals should be free to determine the level of health insurance they want, if any. Yes. Healthcare should be provided by the free market. Yes. These are basically asking the same things. Suicide and euthanasia should be illegal. I love that line. I love that line from a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. Anyway, okay, you dropped off there. But the line is, it's against the law to take one's own life. The penalty is death.
I think it's a
Yeah,
little.
It's like how are you supposed to enforce that law? What are you gonna arrest the
corpse?
It has to rot in prison for a few buried.
All right,
Excuse me.
everyone's dropping out. I'm sorry.
Excuse me. I think it's a little disingenuous to lump in euthanasia in the question, because
Yeah.
that could.
Well, no,
that
because
could include,
euthanasia is a form of suicide.
I think what about done?
Detailed in the person's will.
Yeah. All right. Provision of healthcare should be socialized and made available free of charge. Nope. Not all individuals will take responsibility for planning their retirement. Therefore, an age pension should be provided. Nope.
They're not taking responsibility because the government's bailing them out.
Yep. Socialized welfare programs should be phased out and replaced with a private voluntary system based on insurance, charity, and mutual aid. Yep. A lot of these are just asking the same things. You could really cut down the number of these questions.
Yeah, just redundant.
Most people will not voluntarily help the poor, therefore it is incumbent on the government to provide welfare services so as to combat poverty. We've shown it's exactly the opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Republicans do a lot more charity work than liberals.
Well,
Yeah,
and government poverty measures like welfare just make the poor worse off.
Yeah,
Right.
and as I said earlier, as much as I strongly dislike religion, there's no denying a lot of churches have done some good. I mean, there's a lot of churches that have, food drives and all that. So, I mean,
Charity and civil society will weaken if government does not have the power to direct such activity.
no. If anything, it's the other way around.
In order to preserve global stability, the government needs to embrace foreign political alliances and act as a policeman. In order to preserve global stability, the government needs to embrace foreign political alliances and act like a policeman for the world. Okay, disagree.
Yeah, that's how World War I got started. No.
Yeah, pretty much. Service in the military should be compulsory. No draft.
Hey guys, I'm gonna have to drop off.
All right, we'll see ya.
Okay.
Rights are not inalienable and can be suspended in times of war. And every time they say that, there always seems to be a war going on somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, like the draft dodgers. It's like, why aren't you rationing? Why are you hogging all this? It's like, well, because I want to have some meat over. Our boys are dying because we can't get them meat and butter.
Yeah. Intelligence agencies would be obstructed from preserving security if they were subjected to oversight and transparency. Will be obstructed from preserving security. Okay. So it's saying that if we subject these agencies to oversight and transparency, then they won't be able to make us as secure. So disagree.
Yeah.
That one is badly worded. Very badly worded.
Here's another thing, Shane. I'm just going to point.
See how.
Fourth, I was speaking.
Sorry.
I was about to say real quickly. I've actually read somewhere that says actually by allowing the NSA and CIA to spy on us, we're actually ironically hurting their job because they're literally looking, for everything here and there. Like, they're looking at this one guy, who's just having a bad day and he's ranting and he's saying, some days I just want to blow this place up, and they're looking at him that they're missing the obvious terrorists, It's like by squeezing your fists, you're causing more to just leak out.
Well, so much for keeping this under an hour. Government should not use secret classifications to keep from the public information that it should have. Agree?
Agree.
Foreign policy should seek to keep a nation...
Rika.
Hello, Rika. Foreign policy should seek to keep a nation in a position of strength relative to other nations.
That's how the Cold War got started.
Yeah, because they're trying to like tariffs and stuff like that, I think. So I'm going to disagree.
They're not talking about if I can't survive in this world, then neither can you. So we're going to blow up the world and destroy everyone else because we can't stand the idea that your nation's ruling over us.
Well, it might be that too, but there's probably also the trade crap and all that.
Really, in all honesty, that's the thing that just a little quick thing. That's the thing I hate about nuclear weapons. It's pretty clear right from the get-go that they were invented because both the US and the Soviet Union were spoiled brats and had the mentality of, fine, if I can't have it, then you can't have it. Let's blow up the world.
Foreign policy should emphasize defense against attack from abroad and enhance the likelihood of peace by avoiding foreign entanglements. Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, how many questions do we have left?
It doesn't give me a number. It's got this much left on the progress bar. That's all I can tell you.
Wow.
What does the progress bar say?
Well, it doesn't say anything. It's like, what is it, like 4/5 of the way up? Or maybe 5/6? I don't know.
Okay.
Foreign intervention, including military and economic aid, are necessary for preserving the security of the nation. I'm going to say no.
No.
Yeah.
Economic
aid just makes things worse.
Yeah, because it'll make that one country giving the aid very, very happy, but the rival's gonna be pissed off,
All people have the right to resist tyranny and defend themselves and their rights. Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Impediments?
Yeah, we should be able to punch fascists, right?
Impediments to free trade should be abolished. Yep. Political freedom and escape from tyranny demand that individuals not be unreasonably constrained in the crossing of... Political freedom and escape from tyranny demand that individuals not be unreasonably constrained in the crossing of borders. I think I'm going to agree with that, but it's badly worded.
Yeah.
Trade should be regulated by the government. Nope.
No.
No, indeed.
All right, Isaac is saying there's like 15 left, so it doesn't tell me. It should say things like that. The UI here is not great. Economic freedom demands the unrestricted movement of humans as well as financial capital across national borders. Okay, so agree.
Yeah, and like you've said plenty of times, all those borders are just imaginary lines drawn by politicians, usually after the result of a war or a
threat of a war. Yeah.
Yeah.
All people are born with an inherent right to life, liberty, and property. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Some rights can impose an obligation on others to fulfill that right. No. Government should neither deny nor abridge human rights based on biological characteristics or personal preferences. Yep.
Yup, indeed.
I'm going down here to the corner. Members of private organizations can set standards of association, and individuals are free to respond with ostracism or boycotts. Sure.
Yeah.
I'll agree, even though a lot of those boycotts are really stupid. Even though a lot of the boycotts,
Yeah.
especially today, are really stupid. Like it's like, oh, we're gonna boycott this video game company because its lead producer said something I didn't like on Twitter. Well, were you gonna buy their game? Were you gonna buy their game to begin with? No.
Nope.
Yeah.
Who does?
Well, it's like that one pizza place that didn't want to give pizza to a gay wedding, and people all over the country said we're boycotting it, even though it just had one location. It was his family-owned thing, and all it did was mean that religious people all over the country donated to it to help keep it in, get it through the boycott. So.
And the thing is, Shane, I don't get why companies are scared and they're trying to cater to people who aren't even their customers to begin with. It's like,
yeah, that's weird.
We see it with Star Wars. We see it in all that. We're like, oh, we're gonna implement all these SJWs, and all that. They're like, wait a minute, why are we losing money? It's like, because the SJWs were never your customers to begin with, and by adding those characters, you alienated your current customers.
Yep.
Congratulations, you shot yourself in the foot.
Parents or other guardians have the right to raise their children according to their own standards and beliefs, as long as it doesn't rise to the level of abuse. Sure.
Yeah,
that should be fine.
That sounds like people should be free to speak as long as it doesn't rise to the level of hate speech argument.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but here's the next question. The next question takes care of that. Parents should be able to abuse and neglect their children without fear of intervention. Disagree.
Yeah, I disagree 100%. 100%.
What Yankee ass liberal are you to tell me that I can't beat up my kid because he interrupted my poker game?
Without the state, there would be chaos and disorder. What if I agree because I think chaos and disorder would be good?
Yeah,
I'm going to disagree. I think that's what it's going for.
That's another problem, is that chaos, and when they always talk about chaos, it's always the eye of the beholder. It's like, oh my god, there's all these people in a market, they're yelling and they're negotiating prices and they're trading. There's no officers. God, the horror.
Well, you say chaos, and people think, people running around smashing windows and tossing Molotov cocktails, and not like the Mandelbrot set, or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
The internet, and here's, the perfect example is our own universe. The own universe is like 99.99999% chaos.
All right, we are towards the end here. I don't know how many, but the progress bar is almost full. It is the right of every individual to resist tyranny and abolish it, replacing it with a system that respects individual rights. Yes.
Yeah. Just don't do it.
Here we go. They could have just led with this. The state should be abolished. There we go. Yeah. Boom. Put me down in the corner.
Why did they not put that at the beginning?
Yeah. Then they could have just saved all the rest of the questions.
Yeah, Shane, I was about to go to the last question about, should overthrow government. Just don't do the mistake that Africa and the communist nations did and say, we're going to replace this tyrannical system with a tyranny but it's composed of people we like.
Yeah. The French Revolution is always my favorite examples of that. Oh, we beheaded the aristocracy. Who are we going to put in charge? Robespierre. A little later, oh, that didn't work out. Okay, cut his head off. Who are we going to put in now? Hey, how about this Napoleon guy?
Yep. Oh, he didn't work out, so we're going to exile him to an island. Let's put in some royal guy who nobody gave a shit about. Yeah. Oh, he's not working out. Well, let's put Napoleon's nephew in charge.
I see a check mark here instead of an arrow, so I think we're done. So let me.
The end of the movie Sleeper was great because they kidnapped the great leader's nose so that they couldn't clone him, and destroyed it. And then they're all like, "Oh, we gotta be behind this revolutionary," and Woody Allen's like, well, then in a few more months, it'll be his nose that we crush with a steamroller.
Yeah. Economic is 98 and cultural is minus 100. I think economic probably would be 100 if I hadn't answered that one question neutrally because I didn't understand it. So. Let's see what else it says here. You were spec'd as anarcho-capitalist. You support maximum economic and cultural freedom as well as the abolition of the state. You oppose restrictions imposed by governmental institutions. They probably links there, yeah.
It's I still don't get why people think, you know, anarcho-capitalism is an oxymoron. You know? It's pretty funny. I asked people about, well, why is anarcho-capitalism?
Oh, I got an alert.
Oxymoron?
What was my alert? I didn't see my alert. Oh, okay. Rainbow Asteroids, thank you for your donation. Okay.
Okay, I gotta be going.
Donation.
I was just gonna say real quickly the thing is, I always ask like ANCOMs, like, why is anarcho-capitalism an oxymoron? It's like, oh, because capitalism requires hierarchies and all that. Hierarchies don't really have a lot to do with the state. I mean,
yeah,
hierarchies are gonna occur naturally whether you like it or not. You know?
Money Guys asks, you like
I'm
Jeff
sorry.
Berwick? I like it when he's talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but basically every other time he's off on some weird conspiracy thing, so...
Hey, Shane, what's your opinion about McAfee?
Eh.
You know, it's pretty funny. A lot of people like to use him as an example of why libertarians are wrong. You know, it's like, oh, McAfee's a libertarian, and he wants to do that because he wants to live in his island resorts and corrupt the police and all that. Well, first of all, if I recall correctly, charges were unfounded. Like, no joke.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they've had... No, don't pull the whole, oh, well, he paid people to go away. No, there were independent people that went down there to his private villa. You know, they kept off his eye, and that they found him that could be considered guilty was, yeah, you know...
Well, I mean, he
could make the argument
he was pretty good back in the day when he got famous for making McAfee antivirus. But it's like a lot of the stuff he said about, you know, cybersecurity today is either, you know, very basic stuff or it's so outdated it's wrong. So
yeah.
And
again, like I said, the stuff about have people killed and that he was making, and that, you know, he was making it something. I've heard a lot of crazy stuff. It's like, that's unfounded. Like, if I recall,
it would be great. It would be great if this had a way to review your answers, because I'm thinking I did get confused a couple of times as to which way was agree and which way was disagree, and maybe that happened as well. So there are definitely some improvements that need to be made to this test, but for the most part, it's good. Cut down the number of questions. Get a better interface.
Yeah,
reword some of the questions to be less confusing.
Because like you said earlier, some of those questions, they were more or less the same thing. It's like healthcare should not be socialized. Yeah, I disagree with that. Okay, so you say so healthcare should be privatized. Well, if I don't want it to be socialized, what else would I want it to be? Non-existent? Not existent? If I get sick or injured, I'm just supposed to lay down and pray to the flying spaghetti monster and hope I get better?
All right, well, I guess we will close it off there. Anyone have any parting thoughts?
Nope.
All right. Well, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. No big surprise there. The big surprise was that I made 98 and not 100, but I think that's because of badly worded questions that I didn't understand. But that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll probably do some more of these. People have mentioned a few more quizzes to take. I guess this is the third one we've done, so that officially makes it a series. So we'll see you for the next one, and there's lots of other great videos coming up this week. A Lord Killian and a Shane DK. The podcast will return on Saturday, of course. There'll be a quickie. I'm working on a new set of quickies with a bunch of stuff to talk about, so please keep an eye out for that. Thank you for watching. Thanks to everyone who participated in chat. Thanks for the person who donated. I'm sorry, I forget who that was, and thanks to everyone who supported this channel. Until next time, stay strong and be free.